welcome to Lucky's Bastard channel. Today I will talk about Data Leak, a game about breaking someone's password. It's a little bit the satisfying feeling of a Scrabble game, but without the need for counting points. It's merely a deduction game because there's only a small set of letters available, and while you play the game you are able to reduce the number of available letters to you, and then it's only a matter of time before you can guess the opponent's password because he has to show you something during Data Leak. First I will explain you the rules, later in the video you can see my review. To start with Data Leak you have to put all letters in the sack except for the letters with the dot in the low corner. You have to remove those, but then depending on the language you're playing in you have to put a few letters with dots back in the cloth sack. Take a screen, a rag and a pencil, and if you're playing with two players you take a second rag. Because when you're playing with two players you need two passwords. We also get a keyboard. The language on there is important. We need the English one and it's different on both sides. Shuffle the thread tokens and put them in a heap in the middle of the table, and then we're ready to start with the first round. The game of Data Leak consists of several rounds which we call hacks, and every round exists of two phases: make the password, break the password. The one with the best computer skills may start the game, and the starting player pulls a number of letters from the bag, and it depends on the number of players. Are we with 3 players you pull 9 letters out of the bag, are you with 4 then only 8, and if you play with 2 players you take 14 letters even out of the bag. First thing you should do when you collect your letters is to mark them off on your keyboard. Now you know, for example, that your opponents don't have a W in their word. Next I should try and make a word with at least 4 letters. You should always keep at least 2 letters remaining that you don't use. You don't want to use all letters for the word because the other ones will have a function as well. You can use almost any word that isn't capitalized, including its derivations or inflections, but you shouldn't use abbreviations or words with hyphens or apostrophes. Before the game starts you should agree upon the dictionary you want to use, because that may avoid arguments when you think someone hasn't used a valid word. Now you should turn over all letters, including the letters you didn't use, and you can show all of them face down to your opponent. In the rare case that you cannot make a 4-letter word, then you have to show your letters and then all players start over. Every player takes 2 thread tokens and chooses one of those. The other one is returned. If you're playing with 2 players, you can draw 3 and keep 2. The effects are explained later in the video. So we play in turn order, starting with the starting player, and every turn exists out of 3 phases, which you can have an overview on your screen. Every turn starts with Data Leak. That's the name of the game. And that means that we have to reveal one of our letters of our choice. Then we can reset our drives. The more you have, the more actions you can do in phase 3. Whenever you do an action, you turn it sideways and then it's called activated. So in this phase you will turn your drives upright, meaning that you can use them again in the next phase. And in phase 3 of the turn you can activate those drives to do actions. First thing you can do is scan the web. Then you take a tile from the bag, you look at it and you don't show it to your opponent and you put it in the middle of the table. That's called the internet. When the bag is nearly empty it gets more interesting to pick a letter from the internet and look at it. The designer leaves you the option to choose if you want to shuffle them after each turn or keep them in fixed positions so you know which letters you've seen. When we look at the left of our screen, then we see that it only costs 1 action. We can also choose to get a public drive. That costs 2 actions, however. Then we pick a letter from the bag and we show it to everyone, using it from next turn on as an extra drive to activate. What else can I do with my actions? I can release a thread. Each thread can only be activated once and then discarded, but sometimes the effect will last for everybody's turn. At the end of the video I will go through all of the effects. Last action you can do is break a password. You have to do that to win the game. Even if all letters are revealed, you still need to take the action to break someone's password. And when everybody's password is broken except for yours, then you win the game. If you break a password with more than 2 players, you may look at all the drives from that player that is now eliminated. This way revealing a lot more letters you can cross off. Let's talk about threats next. The robot makes all players do a compulsory break a password action during their next turn, so that may reveal information to you as well. The worm makes every player during the next turn activate an extra drive for every action they do. When I choose to play ransomware, then I choose a player that must give one of their activated drives to me, or he must choose to not reset their drives for next turn, so skipping a turn essentially. When you play Logic Bomb, you pick a player that must reveal a letter for every action he takes in his next turn, unless he can't when all letters are already revealed. When you play Spyware, you can peek at 3 drives of one player. Then there is the DDoS attack. Then you pick a player that skips their entire turn, including the data leak. Next is the Trojan horse. You pick a player and you will watch over his shoulder when he scans letters in his next turn, if he does. And the most famous of all, the virus. You can reveal one letter of 2 different passwords, even when playing with 2 players. Did you guess the word of the last opponent? Then you have 1 and you can mark this win key. You have a second win key, and if you have 3 victories, you win the game. You can of course always choose to play less hacks. That's about it. Let's go to my review. So what do I think about this game about making and breaking passwords? First of all, I have to mention that this is a copy provided by the publisher. It's a small publisher from Belgium, and they only have 100 copies available. So if it's interesting to you, be quick. But it will not influence my opinion on this game. Let's start with the looks of this game. I think it's noticeable that it's only a small publisher, but most of the components are very decent. The only thing I can complain about is the keyboard. It doesn't look that stunning. It's a black keyboard and I have my doubts about that. Okay, it fits with the look of the game, of the rest of the game. It's also not sturdy enough, I think. I do like the sober art on the cover, that looks very neat. So let's move on to entertainment then. This game has a little bit at the start of the game that Scrabble feeling. So that's nice, and I don't like Scrabble at all. Or I do like Scrabble, but I don't like how it evolves during the game. Here it's just a short moment of, okay, I have these letters, what can I do with them? I like that feeling of making words from those letters. Afterwards, it returns a little bit. When you have only, crossed out a lot of letters, you have only a small limited amount of words that is possible to create from the letters that you see from your opponents and the letters still available. You can try to figure out what words are possible. But it's more than Scrabble, it's more than deduction even, because it's a large part of the game. There are interesting decisions to make. You have a threat that you can play. The timing of the threat is important. It's also important to depending on the threats that are currently in play, what shall I do? Maybe someone has played a threat that every action I do this turn will cost 1 more. What shall I do? Shall I change my mind now? What about my plan? There are interesting things to think about. It's a total different feeling when you're playing with 2 or you're playing with more. Because with 2, it's really head to head and you have to outsmart the other one a little bit by timing of the threat and when to use which action. I had some really crazy games in which my words were visible, but I could block the opponent from playing any actions. And then when it came back to me, I had to guess it. So I had like 3 opportunities to guess it. And I did guess it. It can be tanky for a moment, and then people have to wait, but it's waiting in, there's some suspense always. But the big advantage there is that you don't really have to play for someone to win 3 rounds. You can stop whenever you want or like. I don't feel like that's a good rule actually, that you have to play for 3 victories. Okay, I get it. If you're playing 1 game, it really depends maybe on who's the starting player and who has which threat. Some threats can feel overpowered, but most of them can be quite strong depending on the timing and the game, how it is evolving. But with 3 or 4 players, there's also an extra component. There is that who is taking the actions to guess the word of someone else. Because you get a reward, you can see the drives for that player. But on the other hand, if I guess your word, then the next player only has to focus on me. So he might guess my word. And that's a different thing to take into account. And that's interesting. It's very accessible too. You only have to be able to make a word. The other rules, they're not that hard, and you have a overview of the different threads. I think it can be played by anyone, and I don't think it's better or worse with 2 or 4. It's just a lot different. So in conclusion, this is a game that I do really like. Certainly for a word game, there aren't that many word games that I like, and I think this might be one of my favorites. So thank you for watching to this video. If you like this, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.